Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast where we try to make sense of the complex issue of religion and state in Israel. And today, about LGBTQ plus rights and the reform movement in Israel. According to surveys, a large majority of the Israeli public, around 70%, support equal rights for the LGBTQ plus community. Support for this right transcends parties, sectors, and political camps. For instance, most Likud voters support equal rights for LGBTQ plus individuals, and even among voters of the far-right religious Zionist party, 20% support equal rights. But as with other issues like civil marriage and public transportation on Shabbat, broad public support does not translate into legislative change, especially under the current extremist government, which includes homophobic parties. As a result, LGBTQ rights have been granted thanks to Israel's Supreme Court, which in the Israeli system plays a critical role in protecting minority rights and is under constant attack by the current government. A notable exception, which is worth noting, is the law extending equal benefits to same-sex partners of fallen soldiers, granting them the same rights as heterosexual couples. This law, amended by this Knesset after October 7th, was named the Sagi Golan Law in honor of Sagi, who was killed on October 7th and was about to marry his partner Omer. After its passage, Omer remarked, "Thanks to Sagi, we achieved equality in death. Now we will continue to demand equality in life as well." The reform movement in Israel has stood alongside the LGBTQ plus community for years. We have advocated for legal recognition of same-sex couples, and Reform rabbis have been officiating same-sex weddings since 2010. Our communities have long hosted Pride Shabbat events during Pride Month. In 2021, the Reform prayer book Tfilat Ha'adam was published, featuring special prayers for LGBTQ plus individuals, including one for coming out. And almost all children born to same-sex couples through non-Jewish surrogates, as well as those adopted by LGBTQ plus parents, undergo conversion through the Reform movement in Israel. This is because the chief rabbinate here in Israel does not recognize them as Jewish, and the state's official conversion system does not accommodate same-sex families. In addition, the Israel Religious Action Center has provided legal support for the community in various ways. Our Legal Aid Center for Orly achieved in 2014 a major precedent, securing recognition of same-sex spouses under our Israel's Law of Return, which grants citizenship to Jews and their family members. Also, after a prolonged legal battle, Israel's Supreme Court accepted our petition and compelled the Jerusalem municipality to provide funding for the Open House for Pride and Tolerance, the city's leading LGBTQ plus organization. This funding has now been secured for over a decade. Additionally, we support and assist the Jerusalem Open House in obtaining permits for the city's annual Pride Parade. We've also taken legal action against discrimination in various forms against the community. For instance, last summer we sued the Tower of David Museum after it refused to host an LGBTQ plus party following pressure from Orthodox rabbis. As a result of our lawsuit, the court ruled in our favor and forced the museum to hold the party as planned. I went to the party, and when I saw it taking place, it was really moving, especially when a lot of people came to me and shared how much it meant to them, affirming that they also have a place in Jerusalem. Also, last year, we successfully eliminated discrimination against LGBTQ plus couples in the adoption process. As a result of our legal effort, Israel's Supreme Court ruled that despite the law, which refers to adoption by a man and his wife, the law must be interpreted to include same-sex couples. It was a really moving victory. Looking back over the past decade or two, it's clear how much progress has been made in LGBTQ plus rights in Israel, both in terms of public opinion and legal victories, as well as in visibility. Today, pride parades are held in dozens of cities across the country, marking a significant shift in acceptance and recognition. However, we are currently facing an extreme backlash voiced by Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox rabbis and leaders. Some of them hold significant political influence. These voices are also being echoed within the government. We've been actively combating incitement against the community, including from rabbis who are employed by the state. In contrast, the reform movement here in Israel has long been a welcoming home for LGBTQ plus individuals, offering a vision of Judaism that is inclusive, tolerant, and embraces all families and genders. I have the pleasure of hosting today Rabbi Efrat Rotem, who is the executive director of Maram, the Council of Reform Rabbis in Israel, and an independent rabbi who integrates pluralist Judaism, critical feminism, and queer identity into her work as a rabbi, editor, a writer, and translator. Hi, Efrat, and thank you for coming.
Hi, sure.
So let's start by telling us a little bit about yourself. And I'm especially interested to know, how did you become a Reform rabbi?
Right, of course. So first of all, I have to say, after that wonderful intro, that the work of IRAC is just moving. Like, you use that word twice, and it's a good word. And I think it's interesting, this meeting of a lawyer and a rabbi, because I think the way you see things, the way you see progress is measurable, right? But what we do is like spreading out ideas, promoting tolerance, trying to make a home that's inclusive. And that's kind of maybe a little more of a gray area, like how do you measure progress there? So I was born in Ra'anana, which is like 30 minutes from Tel Aviv, in a secular family, and grew up with a lot of curiosity towards Judaism. So my family, we used to fast on Yom Kippur, and we used to eat kosher only on Passover. Mm-hmm. So does it make sense? No. But I think we were Reform. I think when I discovered Reform Judaism, it took more than 20 years. For me, I said to my family, but we're Reform, actually. So I think, maybe a lot of your listeners will agree with what went on in my home where I grew up. So I'm a kind of a language nerd, so I studied literature, and I have an MA in literature, so it's something that really I worked in, and I love words, and I really wanted to learn more. I really wanted to know more, because growing up secular, I didn't know what the Mishnah, what the Talmud was. This entire span of Judaism was blocked for me. So I really wanted to know more, and I went into Batei Midrash, and I went and studied, and then kind of my curiosity grew. Parallel to that, when I was 21, I came out. When I was an officer in the army, an education officer, and it was pretty difficult. Even though my family is pretty liberal, I think it was for them, first of all, a shock, and then they really didn't know what to do. And for me, it was a long process. It was maybe 7 years coming, something like that. So I became an activist 2 years, I think, after I came out, and I started being really like a part of the LGBTQ community in Tel Aviv and in Israel. And I started volunteering at an education organization called Choshen. Then it was, I think, really a sacred job, because we went all over Israel. Whoever opened the door for us, we were there, and we were telling them our personal stories. And I think it has such an impact, just sharing, even though, we used to come to high schools and we would laugh that they are pointing at us, here the queers are coming. But then you just look into someone's eyes and then they see you. And it was just like magic. And I really think my generation, we really, in our bodies, we changed history here in Israel. So that's kind of the way I look at things, like from the social point of view. So for me, it was kind of a natural progression of things to go into the rabbinate. And because I was a social activist, because I was a queer activist, because I said, when I'm getting to know Judaism, I like it, but I have to know that there's a place there for me, and that I can take part in creating that space for others.
It's first of all, a really interesting story to hear this progression and development. And I want to refer to what you said, which is, you said, I want to be part of a Judaism that accepts me. And I think the fallback position for many Israelis is a different kind of Judaism, right? Because the Judaism that is presented to most Israelis, first and foremost by the government, is Orthodox, is ultra-Orthodox, and is definitely not one which is welcoming or accepting toward the LGBTQ plus community. And I think, as I said, now we witness a dramatic development in the negative sense of the government and of people who have a lot of political power who use this against the LGBTQ community and against other groups. And I want to ask, well, such rhetoric is really problematic, and it may drive people away from Judaism if they equate Judaism with this kind of exclusionary version. It also presents an opportunity for us, for liberal Judaism, for the Reform movement, to really showcase a different kind of Judaism, a Judaism that really accepts everyone and does not force people to choose between their identity as part of the LGBTQ community and their faith. And I want to ask, what's your perspective on this?
Right. So I think it's like twofold, because first of all, there are really amazing people, activists, LGBTQ queer activists that are Orthodox, and they have been working for, I think, maybe 20 years now also, working very hard and in ways that are so smart and so accurate in changing the Orthodox society. And there are also people working in the ultra-Orthodox society. It's very different, of course. And I think you can really see...
changing perception within Orthodox society on LGBTQ issues.
And coming out and telling their stories and working with rabbis, working with teachers, organizations like Shoval. It's really astounding to see, because it's not about we're the angels and ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox are the devils. It's really about culture, right? And, we know that you can use religion for anything, right? We know that religion can be extremely racist, it can be violent, it can be, and it can be a source of love and respect and a home for the people. And sometimes, they coincide in a weird way. So it's really about what you do with it. So I really think it's about saying as a society, first of all, that we are creating Judaism. It's not about just reform, or it's not just the word before Judaism. It's just we really want to create a Judaism that people can live in, can live with, can be loved. And I see a shift also in Orthodox Judaism because they see the people, because the people have the strength and the courage to tell them, this is not acceptable anymore. So that's I think the first thing that we need to remember, because all these wonderful changes you told us about, they happened because you had people that said, we want you to represent us, right? We want you to tell our story to the judicial system and change reality. So it always comes from people who are brave enough, and it's also like we always use that word, right? But social change also comes just from when I look at my life now, at my queer life, my lesbian life. So I'm a very tired mother, I have a daughter and I have a wife, and that's my life. I don't think about myself as brave or whatever. I just live my life, and it's not courage. And it's important for us to enable that to everyone. So from that, this is just a very natural way of being. So this is something that we need to allow everyone. But I still think that we have, as Reform rabbis, and Reform movement, we have a very important role at progressing the discourse, at saying, we can read Judaism differently. There are many instances in which Judaism has changed course. And we know that there are two verses in Leviticus. We know that, right? But we choose all the time our Judaism and our religion according to our values. And our values right now are equality. And our values right now are that, love is love, right? So we have a very important role here in first of all, really repairing the hearts of people who come to us and just saying very clearly, and I do say it all the time, that you are loved the way you are. You are loved. You don't need to change in order to be a part of Judaism. It's not only just, because of what you believe, but because it's your culture, because it's your surrounding, because it's something that's your tradition, something that's important to you.
I definitely agree with you that also within Orthodoxy, we hear liberal voices. I think they don't get a lot of prominence, especially not politically prominence. And I think, as you said, that the role of the Reform movement and of liberal Judaism to be a trailblazer, right? We paved the way, I think, in many, many respects to Orthodoxy, to help them raise a voice within their communities and societies. And they're doing it, the people who do it are definitely brave, definitely within ultra-Orthodox community. But I do believe we have this, important role. I mentioned before the Reform Siddur, Tfilat Adam, and I should say that you translate the Siddur together with Rabbi Levi Wyman-Kelman. And our Siddur includes a prayer for coming out. And I want to ask you, do you feel we are addressing unique needs of liberal LGBTQ individuals that have previously been overlooked? What do you see as our role in this regard?
I think in many ways when women came into the rabbinate, and then when queer people came into the rabbinate, so we just see things that others don't, right? As a woman, the fact that there is no prayer that you say when you get your period, right? It's crazy. Like it happens every month. And it's something that, just patriarchal Judaism never made sacred, or even, vice versa, right?
Yeah.
They put it as far away from them as they could. So again, when we're coming into the rabbinate as LGBTQ people, then we say, I see things that you don't, and I want to write a beautiful blessing about it. And I think the inspiration for that, for me especially, was the Sidur Sha'ar Zahav of the Sha'ar Zahav congregation in San Francisco. And when I first encountered their Sidur, I sat down and I cried. Mm-hmm. And I was not yet a rabbinic student or anything. It was just so amazing to see.
When was this Sidur published? Do you know, like how long ago? Or
I think maybe 10, 15, maybe
quite
even. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
quite a while. And just the fact that they gave some thought to, can we write a blessing for someone who will say, I will never be a parent? Just this moment of, it's maybe by choice, maybe because that's how things worked out, but you can bless that moment in your life, right? And you can, even the best part, I think, is that they wrote it made a lot of noise. They wrote a blessing for a one-night stand. And it was inspired by Jacob and the angel, right? The encounter. And I think it's beautiful because, life sometimes takes you to these moments, and then, that it's sacred too. And this idea that our life is sacred is just the opposite of what we were told for so many years. But when we come into religion, when we come into Judaism, then we say, you know what? We know our life is sacred. And you know what? We're going to tell you right now that it's true. That's the way it is.
And you can do it through prayers and through giving it names to specific moments in your life that have been overlooked before.
Yeah, just that's what the rabbis did, right? The sages, that's what they did. They looked at their life, right? Why do we have a blessing that we say before, after we go to the bathroom, right? After we use the toilet? Why? Is it because it's part of life, and because they looked at all the moments of their life, but not necessarily ours.
Yeah. You mentioned the Sha'ar Zahav Sidur, and I think many trends here in Israel in general have occurred before in the U.S., and we usually are following their footsteps. By the way, now the threats on democracy, I don't know which country feeds the other. But on the issue of LGBTQ rights and the relationship to liberal Judaism, we have been inspired by them. And can you share your partnership with American counterparts and additional influences that you have felt specifically in this topic?
I can say that, first of all, I was very honored to take part in the Mishkan Ga'ava book, which is it was edited by Rabbi Denise Eger. She created really kind of a book that takes you to these moments in your life, and maybe to the morning prayer or the evening prayer, or how can you incorporate all kinds of ideas in your Jewish life, throughout your Jewish life. And I'm very proud to have a prayer there, a prayer that I wrote about a blessing that you say after a night you had a lot of sex. So it was very nice. And I think really, feminists and queer people, we bring in the body. It's not about being holy, being sacred. It's not about being, bodiless, or it's really about making the body sacred. I had the privilege of also attending a conference of queer rabbis from all kinds of liberal denominations. It's kind of weird to say liberal Judaism. I think when I got there, I felt like I found my tribe. The nerds who love Judaism, and they're also queer. So it was one of the best experiences, and it happened at Sha'ar Zahav in San Francisco. And for me, it's always a dialogue. I feel closer to rabbis who are queer because I think it's not that easy. It's not like, I have to say that I really don't like the word acceptance. I know I used it a little bit, but in the beginning, but acceptance is really, it's really a power game, right? I give you all the power and you will tell me if I'm okay, right? No, I don't think that's the way to be in the world.
Like it should be reciprocal more than someone giving something and the other taking. Sort of people just sort of feel at home together no matter how they define themselves.
I think if we're really about creating respect for people, regardless of anything, then that's the way to go. And it's hard. It's not about, we will make room for you, but it's about what the gift that we're giving you, that we're giving the world when we take part in anything. So we have a lot to give everyone.
Yeah. And you spoke about sort of feeling at home, and I want to ask you, you served as a congregational rabbi in the past, and you're conducting weddings and bar and bat mitzvahs. And I want to ask, have you noticed a shift over the years in how people respond to you as a queer rabbi here in Israel?
Yeah,
as a queer reform rabbi.
That's what I wanted to say before. It still isn't easy to be a queer rabbi, I think. I know. Not just in Israel, I think also in the States and in North America. We want to tell a story of acceptance and that we're done with that. We're already there, but it's not reality. And that's why I'm talking about looking at diversity as a gift, because it's something that's really true.
But do you feel there is more openness toward queerness in general, toward queer rabbis in Israeli society?
So the way I see Israeli society, and when I think of the shift that I lived through, I'm 46, so I came out 26 years ago, 25 years ago, and I saw a revolution. I was part of a revolution. That's how I feel. And most of maybe the theoretical framework that I was working with came from the States. And a lot of the things said there is about creating a chosen family, is about maybe moving from the place you grew up in, right, into the big cities. And I think that I noticed that here the situation is different. I think that here, because Israel is much more conservative and
family-oriented.
And family-oriented. So the revolution here is different. And it's not about leaving home and seeing your family on Christmas. It's about seeing them every Friday. Every Friday you go to meet your family and to eat with them. It
creates more tensions.
No, they know you more. And most families will not kick you out. Most families will not, sever ties with you. Most families will be okay with you. And then when you're a parent, and we have a crazy boom in gay couples and in lesbian couples. We have a boom of families in Israel, of queer families, because I think also because people don't do it, knowingly, but because they have a kind of a way in to their families. And when you have children, and that's
it brings the family closer.
And you don't need to leave. And you're a part of the the PTA, whatever, and you're part of everything. And that's how I feel that the revolution here in Israel is pretty much secured in terms of the way the people see this, because they know you, and they know they're your friends and they're your family, and they will take care of us. And I think that like Avi Maoz and the person who's like extremely homophobic and filled Israel with posters against LGBT families, like he's the joke.
Yeah. So in this sense, sort of Israel is more liberal than the U.S. toward LGBTQ
not in the way maybe they talk about it, but in reality.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah. So I want to ask you about that. I think really if we look back, we see a significant progress on issues of LGBTQ rights. I mentioned a few achievements, and you spoke about it now. And we have to remember that the visibility of the community has really grown amazingly. We should mention that today the Knesset speaker is openly gay, although he's very anti-LGBTQ rights. But we have openly LGBTQ members of Knesset and cultural and sport figures. And it's very different from what we saw in the past. And I also want to note that the Anu Museum of the Jewish People in Tel Aviv now includes a representation of the LGBTQ community with your powerful presence there. And you are speaking there about your Judaism as a queer Reform rabbi. But on the other hand, we see a homophobic government, and we see Avi Maoz that you mentioned, who has a very, very specific anti-LGBTQ agenda. We see, by the way, a similar tension in the U.S. between, the acceptance, you don't like the word of LGBTQ families, but the other way of, the Trump administration's backlash against the community, specifically against trans individuals. And giving this contrast between the growing public openness toward the community and increasing political threats, where do you think we are headed looking to the future?
Well, I'm optimistic because we have to be, especially now. This government is really the most extreme we've ever had. So they're extreme about a lot of things. And I think they're not really representing the way people feel about especially this issue. Of course, this issue is also an issue of basically racism and, tolerance and all that. So we can't really kind of say, the gays are okay, and then everything is okay. It's not the situation. And also we know that there was a rise in homophobic incidents, and because that's what happens in a war, right? When there's more nationality, there's more violence also towards people who are different. So this is also part of what's going on in Israel. But in many ways, I think we are a reality, and I love reality. I prefer reality upon a good story.
Even if it's challenging, and even if it's difficult, it's still reality. Of course.
The reality is we are here. We're living our lives. Yeah. And we're living our lives in the Israeli way. Our role here as the Reform movement is really to create a place where everyone feels welcome, and it's wonderful to be able to do that.
Thank you, Efrat. I think you really left us with an optimistic message. I want to thank you for coming here and for everything you did. And we'll continue to work for a better future here in Israel and worldwide. And thank you, everyone, for being with us. I hope to see you again in the next chapters.